Alright, Lego is back again with a huge project again, which is why I've been silent for the past month. I've taken a lot of pains to get this off the ground and do it justice, and I'll talk a lot more about that later. But first, let's talk about what you're seeing on screen right now. This is a project that builds on some previous projects I've made with bits from the whole thing. So what you're seeing there is a song. It's a song lyrics. I've previously taken a few bits and bobs of that and made into its own project, which are the ones you see imported on top there. This time I tried to do the whole thing. I say tried, I did do the whole thing. And I wanted to incorporate some of the bits and pieces that I had already made as ready-made assets to just drive that point home and really utilize everything I've done for this project and the surrounding pieces from it. So that's why I decided to take this in first. They add to the project, but they're not instrumental for it as is. The style I'm doing here is the same style I'm using in the FU project and the Don't Tell Me the Rules project. And so I'm going to do a lot of unfurled Shermans, as I just said right there. This is what you're seeing me doing right now. I made some special sentences and words at the bottom that I want to pay specific attention to and I want to really stand out. The rest of the text will largely be unfurled Shermans, which you're seeing me prototype right here. I am typing the raw words as I see fit to get an estimate of what everything takes up space-wise, and also to, well, just get the ball rolling on the actual text. Projects like these are very hard to plan ahead on, but I have to do my best here because I have a lot of text. Well, not a lot of text, but there is a lot of text. It could be worse, but it could also be a lot better. So I'm having to estimate pretty well how much everything's going to take up. And then I'm just going to have to adjust as I go. What you're seeing me do right now is actually add a new thing, which I cleared with the author of the script beforehand. But this is unfurled Spinner Gallifreyan, or something I might end up calling it is helix Gallifreyan, because the end product I'm envisioning here is a sort of helix shape going back and forth, not a double helix but a single helix, to weave that text together in a unfurled format, and that is something I'm very excited to do. But I am using a mix of Sherman and Spinner here for the main body of text. I'm mainly using Spinner Gallifreyan for the repeating text to sort of break up the monotony of the single script there. And the way you prototype that script is simply you count out the number of letters and vowel consonant combinations, and then you just go from there, adding and subtracting layers as needed, with a few reminders in between, because you can't look at this script the same way you can do Sherman's and remember what word is supposed to be what, because they're all very anonymous until you actually put lines and dots on it. So I'm throwing in the occasional identifying word to keep myself on track. Yeah, so some very compact Shermans here. Nothing new on that score, but it's always exciting to try and figure out how many rings, how many layers it's going to take to make a certain number of text. I'm trying my best to do some color coding on the side there, because it is nice if I can get everything titted up without losing memory of what it is. Now, it's going a little quick here, but I'll try my best to describe what's going on here. What you're seeing right now is me trying to wrap my head around how I'm going to make the chorus, because there is I'm going to say almost half the song is just the same line repeated with very few variations. And I tried to figure out how I could do a loop of that. I've had for over a year an idea of how I wanted to do a type of thing like this with Rasilonian mechanics for sentence reading. Rasilonian is very unique in several aspects, but one I'm focusing on right here is the way that you can essentially prescribe the reading orientation and reading order by using various dots arrangements. And if I stretch this to the logical limit, I should be able to make what you're seeing me do right now, a core sentence and a number of logical if-else statements, essentially, by using some form sort of for loop uh, with dot mechanics to essentially make the same line repeat several times without it being strictly confusing or at least self-contradictory. In my head, this clears out the logic, but it remains to be seen if everyone else on the Gallifreyan Discord will accept this as is. No one took me up on my offer to proofread my concept beforehand, so I'll just have to wing it, and we'll see what happens. Now, I'm making the Rasilonian text itself. Nothing unusual there. This is something I've done before, and it's not too often you see Rasilonian these days. But I just needed a light dust up, and then here we are. It's very comparable to TARDIS console, but it is API based. As you can see on the script there on the right hand side, I have a little quick guide I made to just sort of brush up on that. And sometimes, occasionally, I need the full guide up on screen to check a certain concept or not, because there is not a lot of precedence for this. But that said, no orientation markers in this once you're doing certain tenses, which is I am doing here. I'm doing future tense, so I have a set reading order, which means I need the words and the sentences to flow in a certain direction, in a certain way, to make it unambiguous. And that is the biggest challenge with Rasilonian, how to fit everything together while still having a clear reading direction. But that's what you're seeing me do right now. And this sentence in here is, well, it's pretty much perfect for this little experiment in how to use or abuse, as the case may be, the Rasilonian reading mechanics for large sentences to get what you want very efficiently said without having to actually do repeats or loops or any sort of stuff like that. So this sentence is really great because it's going to be said no less than 6 times in a row. So this is pretty much perfect for this. If I can get this to work, I'll be very happy with myself, and I will have opened the doors for this format to be used in many different contexts where you have something repeating and you don't want to use some unconventional looping or some of the start here indicators in Sherman have been used in similar manners, but just not really widespread and still a little bit not completely within the scope of the original script. But this is within the scope of the original script. There's no extrapolating here. It's just laid out in the guide itself, but used in a way that probably wasn't meant to be used in. But it is strictly within the guide. I haven't made anything up in this manner, so really happy about how this turned out in hindsight, even though I couldn't get the symmetry I was hoping for. But that's a minor detail. Having made the raw Rasilonian text now and having fitted it to the space available to me, I now need to figure out how I can get the actual looping done. Originally, I hoped actually I could do with perfect circular shapes, but there's too much overlap, as you can see there. It did not compute, and it would be too confusing to figure out which outline matches with which text. So instead, I ended up having to do some oval shapings to get that stretch that I need without impacting the rest of the perimeter. And it took me surprisingly long to figure out the actual order of the different repeating text and the different for loops, because basically what we have here is one sentence and 5 or 6 for loops just repeating certain parts of that text. Depending on what you overlap, I get the extra bit at the top included or excluded according to the lyrics whenever I need what I need. So almost done there. I seem to be missing. Oh, there we go. That's the last one. So six times original text, and we make a backup of that because now it is time to do some destructive editing, which means we get to cut all the proto text that I made into bits and pieces, which is going to help me tremendously with figuring out what text is what. Because even though it goes really fast on screen, there has been a lot of rereadings and a lot of finagling and just looking at stuff and being like, oh wait, I remember this part, which means that part means that and that and that. So now we actually cut, which is going to be a huge help going forward. And the color coding I was using for this, you probably didn't catch it, but there was a lot of pink and a lot of red and a lot of blue, and then a little bit of green. And the only thing remaining interesting for now is the green. That means there's some punctuation that I need to pay attention to, and I'm going to do that going forward. But for now, I'm adding the dots because I love dots. They're easy to make, they're easy to put, and they're easy to. They do a lot for the comprehension of the piece before I actually add the lines and finish the text. So I love it when I put down dots, just as much as I hate doing the actual lines. So that goes pretty quickly, and dots can take up a lot of space or little space. Depends on what I need, depends on the surroundings. You have a lot of creative freedom with dots, so I like that. Now I am doing a little bit of future planning. I know I'm going to take up some space eventually with a background, so I'm trying to see what I can compress the text down into, just so that it doesn't stick out too much in the end when all is said and done. Now we come to the tedious part, and you don't have to worry about it because for you it's only 10 minutes or something, but for me this was at least 4 hours of doing line work. I started out by marking all the actual lines. You might wonder why I didn't do this from the start, but it just did not. It was not a priority, and there's no need to actually do it before I need it. So now I need it. Adding all the lines for the Sherman components first, because Rasilonian mechanics, they have their own line system. I'm not going to try and mesh with that or integrate that into the rest of the text. It's too specialized, frankly. But I am going to integrate some of the Spinner text later on, but that the way the lines work in that system is very locked, and there's not a lot of modularity to work with there, so those lines are going to have to come as best as they can later on. The Sherman lines are the vast majority, and there is a lot of them, and there's, well, a lot of freedom in them, so I'm just doing those first. And we see the old favorite of making circular elements that almost but not quite touch the things that they're not supposed to touch. You see that all over the place in this project. It's been a favorite method of mine for, I want to say, about half a year now, ever since I did the Danish map project and fell in love with that style. It's a really neat and efficient way of dealing with a lot of lines that you don't want to go far, or you don't know where they're going to go. They're very self-contained, and they're very quickly organized, and they're quick to be edited if need be. So you can do all sorts of cool interplay with that. And in the end, I find that unless there's a good reason for it, straight lines just don't look as cool. But that is just my personal opinion. Now, what you're seeing me do with the two S's, or at least the S and the, I think it was two S's, with the wavy design out there, going from one layer of text to the next. That's something you're going to see a few times, and you're going to see it right there. In fact, that's a new thing I'm trying out. I think I like it. It's a way of making everything feel a little more interconnected without having to worry about the endpoints of the actual line because they stop beforehand. But that was a new look I was trying out, and I think I'm going to keep it whenever the situation arises. That we see it again a third time and a fourth time, because when you have a lot of lines that go in the same direction, there's not a ton of different options you have in terms of what you can do with them. But this was one solution that I found that actually looked pretty cool. So I'm going to do that. Now, because I'm trying to integrate some things that as far as I know, have never been integrated before. I did run into some issues that I felt I couldn't fix on my own. So I probably had more help with this project than I've ever had before. Um, Not least because of one of the scripts I'm using is created by a guy whom I have access to. So it was an easy decision to reach out and ask, "Hey, can I do this with your script? Does this thing I'm thinking of allow for that, or what is going on here?" So I had some help with that, and I had some help with the readability of some of my more questionable choices. Usually, I'm not too bothered about whether or not something is legal or not, because I usually have a pretty good idea myself whether or not something is legit or not. But in this case, I had a few doubts that I wanted to put to rest before I went ahead and did the same technique on everything around me. So I had more help with this project than I had most others, and that's fine. It means that I'm more what's the word? I'm more confident in my end result here, so I can focus on doing the actual work and not worry about the technicalities of some of the things I'm doing. My biggest leap will always be the Rasilonian loop in the middle. That's purely on me, but some of the helix spinner ideas that you're about to see right now will be semi approved by the actual author of the script. So I know that I'm not completely off the whack. So having isolated that text and made a boundary for it so that I can measure out how much space I actually have to do and I have to work with here, what you're seeing me do right now is make the helix, as it were, itself by making all of the words tangential to each other and then removing half of the outer arc. So we have this back and forth wavy line that's essentially encapsulates each word along its overall arc. And this is I'm not going to say it's the most space efficient use of Spinner ever. I've seen and used more space efficient manners, but it's not about space efficiency. It's about moving it along the same arc as the unfurled Shermans, and for that, this is about as compact as you can get. I quite like it. The issue is it is in hindsight very hard to keep track of all the lines, and especially that arrangement you're seeing right there. That was a big no-no in hindsight, because I used a line modifier as a half arc, like a decorational half arc. But anything that looks like an arc in this script is going to be interpreted as a letter, so that's a big no-no. So I did question that, and I did get some people to look at that and say, that's not right, and I did change that back. But essentially, what I'm doing here is I'm scaling everything up as far as I can in the space I have available, and then when everything is tangential, I just make the wavy thing. You're about to see me do a demo test of that there, just to see which way would be better. Um, in terms of the overall design. So moving that away, I essentially end up with the words. And you can see the guide there on the right, another quick guide I made, trying to put in the necessary lines and dots at wherever they needed. But I did slip up a few times, and I hope I've caught it all. But especially the bigger words, there's a lot of lines and dots you have to catch for, and just like the problems I had in the early days with timekeepers and CC Gallifreyan, if you don't rigorously add the dots and lines and end modifiers and the right things at the right place, you will end up being confused because you can't keep track of all the layers. You need to count how many arcs and circles are in each layer, and you need to keep track of what goes where, and the endpoints especially. I did not do that everywhere in this project, but I hope I caught it all. It's it's the downside of making Spinner in the way I did here, with having making all the outer arcs and the overall letter at once, and then filling up the modifiers afterwards. Having if I were to do this another time, and if I had the luxury of the space, I would make one letter in one layer at a time. So adding one circle, what goes where, then add another circle, what goes there, and so on and so on, building it up bit by bit by bit, instead of doing all of the arcs at once and then filling all of the modifiers afterwards, because it is probably the most tedious method of doing that. But nonetheless, I needed the space and I needed to quickly get an idea of how much everything took up. So that's the way it went. And now I just have to pick up the slack and make sure that when I add in all the things, that first of all, that I counted the right number of arcs for everything, so that it actually takes up the space that I envisioned, because it's really hard to make something bigger after you have packed it in with everything else. But also hope that I actually catch all the actual layers and the things that they actually sit on. So that is that's a future me problem, but future me is telling me that I hopefully caught it all. Now, a little curveball here, something that I wasn't sure I was going to add, is the actual metadata, I suppose, of the song. You have the lyrics themselves. That's in the actual project area above, but then off to the side on the far right, you have a little bit of a project from an earlier video I did, where the actual title of the song, just the title, is depicted in a very graphical fashion there. So essentially, what I have is I have the text itself of the song, then I have the title off to the side, and in the very center of the text, I have another little decorational tagline with the essentially the I guess the catch line of the whole thing. A very influential and iconic phrase. But there's also a, I guess you could call it a like a tagline for this particular game, where the marketing department had a slogan they really wanted to mix up with this game. So this is the slogan, I suppose, of the marketing of the game, put off to the left there, meant as a sort of standalone text. It's not meant to be put in with the. It's not meant to be mixed up with the lyrics, and that's why I chose a third script, Dark Affair, for that. Now you might have wondered what the big red ugly drawings on the right side was. That was just stand-ins for maybe I wanted to add in the ice picks, and so I did. Took the old model from my I Shall Rise project and just plopped that in there. So it's pretty low res at this size, but I don't care. I just wanted it in there. I didn't want to do a whole trace project inside this already massive project, and I did already technically have two tracing projects in there, just reused from previous assets. So I felt I had more than enough on my plate. So those ice picks are in there. They're just decorational. I wanted to fill out some of the space because I knew that this project would be not perfectly circular. There would be bits and bobs off to the side. And so these ice picks help take up a lot of space while being very thematically on purpose. So what are we doing now? We are doing the actual words. So um, barring some hiccups with the word characters or the space characters, I put in more of that in a moment. What I'm doing right now is I am inserting extra nodes and deleting segments to create the actual spaces between different words in the same arc. So essentially, what I'm doing is a no point return, point of no return thing where I cut the whole thing into pieces, and this will form the words. In certain segments like this one, I actually make a very elaborate what's the word? I make a very fancy transition from one layer to the next by making these curvy waves to make it very clear what the reading order is, because there is some hiccups with some of the larger blocks of text. Back to the space characters. The song itself, the lyrics, don't have a lot of punctuation, and there's no punctuation at the end of each line. So even though there naturally would be some commas or some periods in the text, each line is its own thing. So there's no real clear separation of when a new line begins, unless you have it in Latin, the normal English alphabet, which you would of course read it as next line, next line, next line. But this is not in linear fashion. It is in unfurled Sherman. So how do you tell the lines apart? I ended up deciding that I wanted to put the space characters in as essentially line separators where appropriate. So that's what I put in there all along, and then I cut up the words, so we end up having the right amount. What you see me do now is add the punctuation for the spinner, and that was also a bit of a hurdle because I had essentially removed half of the outer arc, and that happens to be the arc that is necessary for punctuation work. After some talk with some clever guys, I ended up doing the same thing I do on Gallifreyan. The system there has some double arcs, concentric double arcs for some of the flower modifiers, and I ended up doing the same thing here, which works out pretty well actually. So problem averted. I had my sentencing, I had my punctuation. I am doing a little proofread here, and I'm glad I did because I caught a bunch of stuff, and hopefully that's all caught now. But it does mean that this is probably the last pass through of the spinner. So we're doing pretty okay here. It's been a long while since I did a proofread on this, so we're at the finishing touches now. Now, finishing touches in this context means going through and adding stylistic choices. I have the text. I'm pretty reasonably sure that it's done. I've done 2 proofreads of most of it, and there's more importantly, there's been a lot of time developing this. So it's been a month from start to finish, which means I've had to go away from this project for a while, and then when I come back, I inevitably have fresh eyes on things, and sometimes that's the best way of catching errors. That's just to go away and come back later. So I had that going for me. But now it's time for the stylistic choices. I'm finishing up a lot of the stuff with the different color codes. Red at this point is just the leftovers from the initial arcs, so I'm erasing those as I go along. There's a few green lines still, I think, from leftovers in punctuation, but I think at this stage it's pretty much done for. There was a few sharp corners that I needed to add manually, and then of course there is the little reminder of the line work in Rasilonian in the middle, which I left off for last, because that's pretty much a thing on its own. I did leave the project with a curious half arc in the middle. Right now I'm doing the background framing because I needed that for color work later. But as far as I go, now we're looking at the Rasilonian mechanics, prettying up some of the lines a little bit, and extending them as appropriate. Line work in Rasilonian is complicated, at least if you want to do fancy work, and I really did not want to get into it, so I just left them as empty lines ending up in nothing, which is quite frankly the safest option. But it got done, and I'm reasonably sure I caught all the errors in Rasilonian as well a long time ago, so I'm not actually going to reread that. If there is an error there, I'm going to have to live with it. it's a bit difficult to fix errors in Rasilonian post processing, but it can be done. Now, due to the nature of the actual inserts from the previous project here, I need a dark background around it to mask the fact that it's not a finished project on its own. Well, it is, but usually I rely on the framing of my project to mask the bits and pieces that stick out. This time I need another way of getting about that. So now I'm taking the last step before I actually color it in. I'm doing the converting to paths from objects and from solids and strokes. So I am left with just path that I can unionize, and I do that for both Sherman and Spinner and Rasilonian and the various bits and pieces that I want together, including the Gallifreyan text on the left. And I did have some rogue groups pop up because I did not fix all my strokes before converting, so that took a while to figure out. This stumped me for a long time because I could not unionize the things in the center of the Rasilonian. I ended up having to do it manually. I don't know what went wrong. I don't know what was holding me up there, because at the end of the day, I think it was a selection issue. It wasn't an issue with the actual elements. I don't know what went on there, but I did it manually, and end of story. And what are we doing now? We're doing some color work. So yeah, I mentioned I had a half arc left in the left side of the Rasilonian. That's just a consequence of the spinner text that I had to stop at the top because I need Rasilonian to start from 12 o'clock. That's just a quirk of the rules, which means I had some empty space on the left side. I did not know how to fill that, so I just left an arc in there. And what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to add in a little bit of color. I have no idea at this stage why I decided on blue and red. That's just what I went with. I did not plan this out. I'm not even really sure I like the red, but I guess it complements the blue, and it's a little bit it stands out a little bit. So I don't hate it, but I don't know if this is the best choice in the world, but I'm gonna go with it for now. Tried to do some subtle texturing on the background. I ended up deciding that there was too much red, so I tried to scale that down a bit, remove some of the extra bits and pieces, and I ended up just doing a texturing of the ice picks separately, and then the background as its own thing, because it was interfering too much with the shadow work in the center and onto the right there. So I scaled that back down a bit, removed some of the red from the arc on the left, and then I added my little watermark on the left. Not something I usually do, but for some of my big projects, I tend to do it because it just feels right. And then I lightened the color in the center a bit to make that pop, and here we are. This is a really short song. Actually, it's not a long or complicated song, and I did not envision the project to be as big as it ended up being. But here we are, and 15 hours later, I am done, and I'm tired, and I want to do some simpler projects for a bit. So this is it. I'm really happy with it, and I hope you enjoyed watching this, and have a good day. Bye.